If Rosa didn't steal the blanket tonight, the man in the alley would be dead by morning, and she had no idea he was about to become the key to saving her own son's life. Rosa Martinez had cleaned 847 hotel rooms in 26 years, without breaking a single rule. Tonight, she was about to commit a felony that would either destroy her life or rewrite the destiny of 4 people she'd never imagined were connected. The grandfather clock in the Grandview Hotel's marble lobby chimed 3:47 a.m. as Rosa pushed her cart down the executive hallway, each squeak of the wheels echoing like a countdown to disaster. In exactly 67 hours and 13 minutes, Immigration and Customs Enforcement would kick down her apartment door on Catesy Avenue. They didn't know she existed yet, but Francisco Gutierrez, her vindictive ex-boyfriend who'd been deported 6 months ago, had made sure they would. Rosa's hands trembled as she folded the Egyptian cotton sheets from the penthouse suite, her calloused fingers catching on fabric that cost more than her monthly rent. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's February wind howled like a dying animal, rattling the glass with such violence that ice crystals were forming on the inside. The meteorologist on Channel 7 had called it the coldest night in Chicago history, -14 degrees, with wind chills dropping to me. Down in the service alley, barely visible through the swirling snow, was the homeless veteran she'd been watching die in slow motion for 23 days. Jake, navy tattoo on his left forearm, missing 2 fingers on his right hand, from some explosion he'd never talked about. Every night for 3 weeks, she'd watched him grow weaker, thinner, more hollow. Every morning at 4 a.m., she'd depress her face to the same window and count to see if his chest was still rising and falling. Tonight, for the first time in 23 days, she couldn't see any movement at all. Rosa grabbed the emergency flashlight from her cart and aimed it down at the alley. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on Jake's motionless form, curled against the brick wall in a fetal position that reminded her sickeningly of the homeless bodies she'd seen covered with sheets on the south side. His skin looked blue even from 50 floors up. Rosa thought about her son Carlos, deployed somewhere in the Kunar province of Afghanistan, where the temperature also dropped below zero and soldiers sometimes froze to death in their sleep. 3 weeks ago, Carlos had called her crying, his first time crying since he was 12 because his best friend, Martinez, had been killed by an IED while delivering blankets to Afghan children. "Mom," Carlos had sobbed over the satellite phone, "Martinez died trying to keep kids warm. He died for a fucking blanket, and I can't stop thinking about how cold those kids are going to be tonight." Rosa thought about her deportation in 67 hours. She thought about the immigration lawyer who demanded $12,000 upfront money that might as well have been $12 million. She thought about never seeing Carlos again, about him coming home from war to find his mother gone without a trace. But mostly she thought about finding Jake's frozen corpse in the morning and knowing that she had watched a human being die, while she stood in a heated building surrounded by blankets worth more than most people's cars. Without hesitation, the kind of decision that ruins lives or saves them. Rosa walked to the linen storage room and pulled out one of the hotel's premium cashmere wool blend blankets. The tag read $1,847, property of Blackwood Hospitality Group, more than she made in 6 weeks of 14-hour shifts. Her supervisor Margaret Kowalski had made it crystal clear during orientation 6 months ago, when Rosa had been transferred to the executive floors. These blankets are inventoried daily. One goes missing, we call the police. One gets damaged, it comes out of your paycheck. Hotel property never leaves this building, period. Anyone caught stealing will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and immediately reported to Immigration Services. 26 years of perfect service. 26 years of being invisible, reliable, trustworthy. Never a sick day, never a complaint. Never so much as taking home a single coffee packet or soap bar. All about to end, because she could unwatch another human being freeze to death 40 feet from where she stood. Rosa took the service elevator to the basement, each floor counting down like a death sentence. B1, B2, B3, ... Basement. If she was caught, ICE would be called within the hour. Instead of 67 hours, she'd have 67 minutes before she was in handcuffs. She swiped her keycard and slipped out the emergency exit into air so cold, it felt like broken glass in her lungs. The wind hit her with such force that she staggered sideways. The blanket nearly ripped from her hands. Her breath crystallized instantly, and she could feel her nose hairs freezing with each inhalation. Jake wasn't just motionless, he was dying. His lips were purple-black, his fingernails blue. When Rosa pressed her ear to his chest, she heard the most irregular, labored heartbeat she'd ever encountered, like an NG struggling to turn over in sub-zero weather. His breathing was so shallow, it was barely detectable. "Jesus Christ," Rosa whispered, her words forming ice clouds. "Jake, can you hear me?" No response. His body was rigid, his skin cold as marble. Rosa wrapped the $1,847 blanket around Jake's frozen body and began rubbing his arms through the fabric, trying to force circulation back into his extremities. She'd learned basic first aid when Carlos was in high school. Football hypothermia meant you had minutes, not hours. "Come on, Jake," she pleaded, continuing to massage his shoulders and chest. "Don't you die on me. Don't you fucking die on me?" His eyes fluttered open, bloodshot, confused, pupils dilated with what Rosa recognized as the beginning stages of death. "Rosa." His voice was a barely audible rasp. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Rosa pulled off her own winter coat and wrapped it around him over the blanket, leaving her in just her thin uniform polo shirt. The cold hit her like a physical assault, but she didn't care. "I can't. Feel my ... Jake tried to lift his hand but couldn't complete the movement. "Don't talk. Save your energy." Rosa opened her thermos and pressed the hot coffee to his lips. "Drink this." Small sips. The coffee was still steaming, and as it touched Jake's lips, he winced like it was burning him. That was good. It meant he could still feel something. For the next 47 minutes, Rosa fought death itself in that alley. She gave Jake her coffee, her emergency granola bar, and the turkey sandwich she'd brought for her own dinner. She took off her shoes and socks and rubbed his feet with her bare hands until she could unfeel her own fingers. She talked to him constantly about Carlos, about her childhood in Guadalajara, about the weather, about anything to keep him conscious and responsive. When color finally started returning to his cheeks, Jake grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Why?" His voice was stronger now, more like the Jake she'd been talking to for 3 weeks. "Rosa, you could get fired. Deported. Why risk everything for a piece of shit like me?" Rosa looked into his green eyes, she noticed for the first time. The same color as Carlos's saw something she recognized from her son, Isfate. The day he deployed. The look of someone who believed he was worth saving. "Don't you ever call yourself that," Rosa said fiercely. "You're a veteran. You served this country. You have a daughter somewhere who might not know how to reach you, but that doesn't mean you don't matter." Jake's eyes filled with tears. "My daughter, ... His voice broke. "Emma. She's 8 now. I haven't seen her since she was 6. Her mom won't let me. ... Because of the drinking. Because of the episodes ... What's her favorite color?" Rosa asked. "What?" "Your daughter. What's her favorite color?" Jake looked confused. "Pink. Why?" "Because fathers who remember their daughter's favorite colors are not pieces of shit," Rosa said, still rubbing warmth into his hands. "They're men who loved their children and lost their way. There's a difference." What Rosa didn't know was that 47 floors above them, Alexander Blackwood, hotel owner, Forbes billionaire. And Jake's estranged father was having the worst night of his 2-year insomnia streak. At 4:34 a.m., he was standing at his penthouse window with a glass of 25-year-old scotch, looking down at the city he owned and feeling like he controlled nothing that mattered. For 18 months, he'd been paying Pinnacle Investigations $15,000 per month to find his son. For 18 months, the best private detectives in Chicago had come up empty. Jake Williams had vanished into the invisible population of homeless veterans, becoming one of the 37,878 people experiencing homelessness that the city preferred to pretend didn't exist. What Rosa also didn't know was that the security camera in the service, Ali Kameta Sechibi, had been recording everything on a Mosho-activated loop for the past 3 weeks, and that Miguel Santos, the night security supervisor, had been watching it all unfold on Monitor Bank C for the last 47 minutes. Miguel had been a Marine. Fallujah, 2004. He recognized hypothermia when he saw it, and he recognized something else. Genuine human decency in action. He had 2 choices that would determine 3 people as futures: report the theft immediately and have Rosa arrested, or delete the footage and pretend he'd never seen anything. But Miguel was also a father. His own son was a senior at UIC, studying to be a social worker. And Miguel had seen enough good people destroyed by bad choices to know the difference between someone stealing for greed and someone stealing to save a life. He made his choice. Instead of calling his supervisor, Miguel picked up his cell phone and called someone else entirely. For the next 6 days, Rosa checked on Jake every night after her shift. She brought him hot soup in thermoses, clean socks from the hotel laundry, and hand warmers she bought with tip money she'd been saving for Carlos's care packages. Jake was getting stronger, cleaner, more hopeful. He'd started showering in the 24-hour gym down the street and had managed to get 3 job interviews. Using the hotel's address as his mailing location with Rosa's permission, they'd developed a routine that felt almost normal. She'd arrive around 4 a.m. with food and supplies. They'd talk for 20 minutes, and she'd give him updates on Carlos's deployment. Jake would tell her about his Navy service, about the daughter he was desperate to see again, about the night terrors that had cost him everything. "I used to be an engineer," Jake told her on Wednesday night, day 4 of their strange friendship. "Naval systems. Good at it too. But after the explosion... I can't concentrate for more than 10 minutes at a time. I'll be in the middle of a conversation and suddenly I'm back in that ship, watching my friend die." Rosa never told him about her deportation countdown. 7 days became 6, then 5, then 4, then 3. She couldn't bear to tell Jake that their meetings were numbered, that in less than 72 hours she'd be gone forever. On Thursday morning, exactly 43 hours and 16 minutes before, Ice was scheduled to arrive at her apartment. Rosa as supervisor. Margaret appeared at the linen closet door with an expression that made Rosa's blood freeze in her veins. "Rosa, Mr. Blackwood wants to see you. Top floor. Right now." The words hit Rosa like a physical blow. Alexander Blackwood was the hotel owner, old Chicago money. Ruthless businessman, the kind of man who appeared on the cover of Forbes and destroyed people's lives before his first cup of coffee. In 26 years of working for Blackwood Hotels, Rosa had seen him exactly 3 times, always from a distance, always surrounded by men in expensive suits. "The blanket?" Rosa's voice came out as a croak. Margaret's expression was unreadable. "I don't know. But Rosa... She paused, looking around to make sure they were alone. "Whatever happens up there, you should know that some of us have been watching you take care of that man. Some of us think you're the best person in this building." "What does that mean?" "It means," Margaret said quietly, "that good people recognize good people. Now go. Don't keep him waiting." The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like ascending to her own execution. Rosa's hands shook as she tried to smooth wrinkles out of her uniform, a futile gesture. Since she'd been wearing the same polo shirt for 3 days straight to save on laundry money, in 43 hours, she'd be deported anyway. But if Blackwood called ICE right now, Carlos would never see his mother again. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carlos: Moham got your care package. The guys loved the homemade cookies. You're the best mom in the world. Love you. Rosa closed her eyes and tried not to cry. If this was the last text she'd ever receive from her son, at least it was a good one. The elevator doors opened to reveal an office that was larger than Rosa's entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, the morning sun glinting off Lake Michigan in the distance. Alexander Blackwood sat behind a mahogany desk that looked like it had been carved from a single tree. His silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, his steel-gray eyes unreadable. But something was wrong. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his tie askew, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying. And on his desk, impossible to miss, was the hotel's premium cashmere wool blend blanket. The one she'd stolen. The $1,847 piece of evidence that would destroy her life. Next to it was a manila folder with her name written on it in block letters. And next to that was a cell phone, screen up, showing what looked like a paused video. Rosa Martinez, Blackwood said, his voice strangely hoarse. 26 years of service. Perfect attendance record. Never a single complaint from guests or staff. Rated exemplary in every annual review. And now this. He gestured to the blanket. Do you know why you're here? Rosa couldn't speak. She nodded toward the blanket. Yes, Blackwood said. The blanket. The $1,847 blanket that you stole from this hotel 6 nights ago. The blanket that ... His voice cracked completely. The blanket that saved my son's life. The room tilted. Rosa grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. Your son? My son? Blackwood stood up slowly, like a man who'd aged 10 years overnight. The homeless veteran you've been caring for in our service alley. Jake Williams. Jake Blackwood. My son, who I kicked out of my house 2 years ago, because I was too proud and too ashamed to help him when he needed me most. Rosa sank into the chair, her legs giving out completely. The room was spinning, and she felt like she might vomit. That's impossible, she whispered. Blackwood opened the manila folder with hands that shook almost as badly as Rosa. He slid a photograph across the polished surface off family portrait that looked like it had been taken maybe 15 years ago. A younger Alexander Blackwood with his arm around a beautiful woman. And between them, a teenager who was unmistakably Jake. Same green eyes, same stubborn jawline, same smile that Rosa had been trying to coax out of him for 6 days. Jake Williams is the name he started using after his discharge, Blackwood said, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't want to be associated with the Blackwood name anymore. Said I'd made it clear he wasn't worthy of it. Rosa stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. You're his father. I was his father, Blackwood corrected. Now I'm just the man who failed him when he needed me most. Blackwood walked to the window and stared down at the alley where his son had nearly died. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with shame and regret. Jake enlisted right out of high school. Naval Academy, top of his class. I was so proud of him. He was going to be everything. I never was honorable, selfless, serving something bigger than himself. He turned back to Rosa, tears streaming down his face. He did 2 tours in Iraq, came back different. Nightmares, panic attacks, drinking. The VA said it was PTSD and traumatic brain injury from an IED explosion that killed 3 of his friends. I said it was an excuse. I told him to man up, get his act together, stop embarrassing the family name. Rosa felt her own tears starting. When his wife left him and took Emethat's, his daughter, I blamed him for that too. Said if he'd been a real man, a real father, she never would have left. When he lost his job because of the memory problems and panic attacks, I told him he was using his military service as a crutch. Blackwood sat down heavily in his chair, looking older than his 63 years. 2 years ago, Jake showed up at my house in Lincoln Park at 3 in the morning. He was drunk, desperate, begging for help. He said he hadn't eaten in 4 days, that he'd been sleeping in his car until it got repossessed, that he just needed a place to stay until he could get back on his feet. Rosa leaned forward, hanging on every word. You know what I did? Blackwood's voice was filled with self. I called the police, had my own son arrested for trespassing. Told the officers he was a disturbed veteran who'd been harassing my family. I got a restraining order, made sure he could never come within 500 feet of my property. The silence in the room was deafening. The last thing I said to him was, "You're not my son anymore. My son died in Iraq. You're just a broken stranger wearing his face." Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I hired private investigators 18 months ago, Blackwood continued. Spent over $200,000 trying to find him. I was finally ready to apologize, to help, to be the father I should have been from the beginning. But Jake had vanished, completely off the grid. The investigators said he'd probably left Chicago, maybe even left the country. Blackwood picked up his cell phone and pressed play on the paused video. The screen showed security footage from the service alley, black and white, grainy, but clear enough to see Rosa kneeling beside Jake's motionless form 6 nights ago. Our night security supervisor, Miguel Santos, brought me this footage yesterday morning, Blackwood said, his voice shaking. He said he'd been watching you take care of someone in our alley for weeks, feeding him, bringing him supplies, talking to him. Miguel is a Marine veteran. He recognized hypothermia when he saw it, and he recognized something else. Rosa watched herself on the screen, wrapping the blanket around Jake, taking off her own coat, pressing coffee to his lips. Miguel said that on the night you stole the blanket, my son was already dying. His lips were purple, his breathing was almost non-existent. Miguel timed it. You spent 47 minutes in sub-zero weather, giving Jake everything you had to keep him alive. The video showed Rosa rubbing Jake's hands and feet with her bare fingers, talking to him constantly, refusing to leave even as her own body was shaking violently from the cold. Miguel told me that if you hadn't acted exactly when you did, with exactly the determination you showed, Jake would have been dead by morning. He said you saved my son's life while I was sleeping 50 floors above in comfort, having no idea that the person I'd been searching for was dying right outside my building. Rosa was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know he was your son. I know, Blackwood said softly. That's what makes it even more remarkable. You risked everything, your job, your immigration status, your freedom for a complete stranger, because you saw a human being who needed help, and you couldn't stand by and watch him die. The office door suddenly burst open, and Margaret rushed in, followed by James from accounting, Miguel Santos, and several other employees Rosa had worked with for years. Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry to interrupt, Margaret said breathlessly. But there's something you need to know about Rosa. Something we just found out that changes everything. Blackwood looked up, surprised by the intrusion. What ICE is coming for her tomorrow? James said, stepping forward. Rosa's being deported at 6 a.m. Some of us have been trying to help her find an immigration lawyer, but she needs $12,000 for legal fees that she doesn't have. Miguel added, Sir, we also found out that Rosa has been sending every extra penny she makes to support her son who is deployed in Afghanistan. She has been living on ramen noodles and working double shifts to make sure her boy has everything he needs overseas. More employees began filtering into the office, word spreading through the hotel like wildfire. housekeepers, front desk clerks, kitchen staff, maintenance workers, people Rosa had worked alongside for decades. People who barely spoken to her beyond good morning and have a good night. Rosa never told anyone about her immigration status, said Maria from housekeeping. But after we found out about ICE, some of us started asking around. We found out she's been working 7 days a week for 2 years, sending care packages to soldiers in her son's unit, not just her own boy. She bought winter coats for 3 Afghan children with her Christmas bonus, added David from the front desk. Never told anyone. We only found out because the military chaplain sent a thank you letter to the hotel. Rosa stared at them in shock. She'd had no idea that anyone noticed her, much less cared about what happened to her. Blackwood looked around at his assembled employees. Some of them had worked for him for 20 years, and realized he'd never seen them like this. United, passionate, fighting for one of their own. "Sir," Miguel said, stepping forward, "I need to tell you something else about that night. I was watching the security monitors, and I had a choice to make. I could have called my supervisor immediately and had Rosa arrested. But I'm a father, and I'm a veteran, and I recognized what I was seeing." Miguel paused, choosing his words carefully. "I was watching a mother save someone else's child the way she wants someone to save her own child. So instead of reporting the theft, I called my cousin Eddie, who works for Chicago Rescue Mission. I told him there was a veteran in crisis who needed immediate help. Eddie came and picked up Jake that morning, got him into a warm shelter, connected him with VA services." Blackwood's eyes widened. You saved him too." "No, sir," Miguel said firmly. "Rosa saved him. I just made sure the savings stuck." Blackwood stood up slowly, looking around at the faces of his employees, people he'd worked with for years, but had never really seen as individuals with their own struggles and stories. "Where is Jake now?" he asked Miguel. "Northwestern Memorial Hospital," Miguel replied. "Voluntary psychiatric hold. He's getting treatment for PTSD and alcohol dependency. But sir, he's been asking about Rosa every day. The nurses say he calls her his guardian angel." Rosa looked up through her tears. "Is he okay? Really okay?" "He's getting the help he should have received 2 years ago," Miguel said. "But Rosa, he needs to see you. He thinks you've disappeared, and it's making his recovery harder. He doesn't understand why his angel abandoned him." Blackwood walked back to his desk and pulled out a thick legal envelope. "Rosa, stand up." She stood, wiping her eyes, expecting to be handed a termination letter or an arrest warrant. Instead, Blackwood handed her a completely different set of documents. "You're not being deported," he said firmly. "As of this moment, you are the Chief Operating Officer of the Jake Williams Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to serving homeless veterans. Full legal team to handle your immigration case. Full path to citizenship, and a salary of $120,000 per year." The room went dead silent. Rosa stared at the documents, unable to process what she was reading. "Furthermore," Blackwood continued, his voice growing stronger, "we're converting the entire 3rd floor of this hotel into transitional housing for homeless veterans. 36 apartments, full social services, job training programs. Miguel Santos will oversee security and veterans outreach. Margaret Kowalski will supervise the housing program." He looked around at his employees. "Everyone in this room is getting a 20% raise, effective immediately. And anyone who wants to transfer to the foundation to work directly with veterans can do so with no loss of seniority or benefits." Rosa sank back into the chair, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. Why?" Blackwood knelt in front of her chair, this billionaire humbling himself before a woman who'd spent 26 years cleaning his hotels. "Rosa, for 2 years, I've been paying investigators a fortune to find my son, so I could apologize for being the worst father imaginable. For 2 years, I've been trying to undo the damage I caused by abandoning him when he needed me most. His voice broke completely. But you, a woman facing deportation, a woman working 7 days a week to support her son at war, you didn't hesitate for a second to risk everything you had for a stranger. You gave my son the love and care I should have given him. You saw him as worth saving when his own father saw him as a failure. Tears were streaming down Blackwood's face. You didn't just save Jake's life, Rosa. You taught me what unconditional love looks like. You showed me that being a parent means being willing to sacrifice everything for your child, especially when they can't ask for help. The room was silent, except for the sound of 20 people crying. Margaret stepped forward and put her hand on Rosa's shoulder. Rosa, do you want to know what we call you behind your back? Margaret asked softly. Rosa looked up, scared to hear the answer. We call you La Madre, Margaret said. The mother. Because for 26 years, you've taken care of all of us. You've covered shifts when we were sick, brought food when we were broke, listened when we needed someone to talk to. You've been the mother of this entire hotel family, and we never told you. Maria from housekeeping added, my daughter is graduating from nursing school next month, because you helped me with English lessons for 3 years. You never asked for anything in return. David from the front desk said, when my dad died last year, you worked my shifts for 2 weeks so I could take care of my mom. You refused to let me pay you back. One by one, Rosa's co-workers shared stories she'd forgotten, small acts of kindness, moments of support, years of quiet generosity that had touched their lives in ways she'd never realized. You are the heart of this place, Blackwood said, his voice filled with emotion. You've been taking care of everyone, your co-workers, your son, homeless veterans, strangers in need, while asking for nothing in return. You've been living paycheck to paycheck, facing deportation, working yourself to exhaustion, and still finding ways to help others. He handed her another envelope. This is a signing bonus, $100,000. Use it to bring your son home safely when his deployment ends. Use it to make sure you never have to choose between helping others and taking care of yourself. Rosa opened the envelope with shaking hands. The check was real. But most importantly, Blackwood continued, use it to know that your kindness has been seen, your sacrifices have mattered, and your love has literally saved lives. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, 3 hours later, Jake Williams was sitting by the window of his room, clean-shaven and wearing hospital scrubs that actually fit. When he saw Rosa walking down the hall with his father, 2 people he'd never imagined would be in the same room together, he started crying. Rosa, he whispered as she entered the room. They told me you were gone. They said you might be in trouble because of me. Rosa hugged him tight. This young man who looked so much like Carlos, who'd become like a second son to her heart. I'm not going anywhere, Jake, she said. And you're not in trouble. You're loved. You're wanted. And you're going to be okay. Jake looked at his father over Rosa's shoulder. 2 years of hurt and anger and abandonment stood between them like a wall. Dad, Jake said quietly. I'm sorry I disappointed you. Alexander Blackwood stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. Son, he said, his voice breaking. I'm the one who's sorry. I failed you in every way a father can fail his child. But if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life making it right. 6 months later, the Jake Williams Foundation had housed 127 homeless veterans and reunited 43 of them with their families. Rosa's English had improved dramatically thanks to the college courses Blackwood was paying for. And she'd been featured on the cover of Chicago magazine as the woman who changed everything. Carlos Martinez came home from Afghanistan a decorated sergeant, proud to tell his fellow soldiers that his mother was a hero who saved lives while he was serving overseas. Jake Williams had been sober for 180 days, had visitation rights with his daughter Emma again, and was working as a counselor at the foundation. helping other veterans navigate the system that had failed him. And every night at 4 a.m., Rosa Martinez still walked through the service alley behind the Grandview Hotel, not as a cleaning lady anymore, but as the chief operating officer, making her rounds, checking on the men and women sleeping in warm beds instead of frozen concrete. The blanket, the $1,847 Kush blend that had started it all, was framed and hanging in the foundation's lobby with a plaque that read, "Sometimes the most important decision you'll ever make costs you everything you have. Sometimes it saves everyone you love. Sometimes it's both." But Rosa kept a different memento in her new office. A text message from Carlos that she saved in her phone. "Mom, I heard what you did. I always knew you were a hero, but now the whole world knows it too. You taught me that courage is about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you read. I love you. Your son, Sergeant Carlos Martinez, U.S. Army." Below that, a message from Jake, sent on his 6-month sobriety anniversary. "Rosa, you saved my life twice. Once when you kept me from freezing to death, and once when you showed me that I was worth saving. Thank you for seeing the man I could become when all I saw was the mess I'd made. Love, your honorary son, Jake." And at the bottom of her phone's message thread, one final text that she read every morning was, "You gave me back my son, but more than that, you taught me how to love the way a parent should love, without conditions, without limits, without fear. Thank you for showing me that family isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to risk everything for the people who matter." Alexander Blackwood.